Hello there again, my friend. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, or if you're listening to the audio here on the Red Delta Project podcast, helping you to be fit and live free by taking a fundamental approach to diet and exercise. And Matt Schifferly as always, and today's episode is a crucial lesson in understanding your motivational drive, because that is one of the three fundamental processes that's ultimately responsible for your success in anything in life, but especially when it comes to getting the results you want, building muscle, losing weight, eating better. Everything you're trying to do depends entirely on your emotional, motivational drive. Because if you don't have the motivation to take the necessary habits to get the results you want, you're basically screwed. So that's why a lot of a fundamental approach to fitness is about how do you achieve and maintain or elevate your motivation. Now, just to recap really quick, it's important to realize that your emotional drive is dependent upon the perceived costs relative to the perceived benefits of the actions you're taking. So if what you're doing, like let's say going out for a run, has a very high perceived benefit with a low perceived cost, you're going to be very motivated to do it, and therefore you're going to do it on a more consistent basis, and you're going to do it a lot more and get better results. However, if your perceived costs are very high and your perceived benefits are very low, your motivation is going to tank, and it's going to be almost impossible for you to take any sort of necessary consistent action for you to get what you want. And that's why being aware of the fundamental reasons why we have motivation or why we may lose it can be so important. And we don't want to make the mistake that I know a lot of times on social media and YouTube, you hear people like, don't worry about motivation, don't focus on motivation. Motivation's not important, you need discipline and all that sort of thing. But the fact of the matter is, it's impossible to be disciplined without motivation. You will never find a disciplined individual who is also not in equal amounts motivated. Because if they're not motivated, they're simply not going to be disciplined. It's that simple. You cannot make up for a lack of motivation with discipline. It's impossible. It's not how human beings work. So the big lesson here, though, is that, again, it's not about cost to benefit ratio as far as absolute cost to benefits. It's the perceived or relative cost of benefits to you. Now, let me give you a little bit of a context, a couple stories here to put this into perspective. Back when I moved back here to Colorado, I was in a very different financial situation. I was drowning under a mountain of credit card debt. I wasn't really making any money. I didn't really have much of a job. I had very little income coming in, or basically I was flat out broke, right? So for me, on a Saturday night, I couldn't afford to really go out with friends. I didn't really have much of a social life then. I remember there were times when I would be like, should I kind of let my hair down, proverbially speaking, or hypothetically, so to speak, and go out to, there was a corner store and they sold really cheap beer. And I was like, should I go and splurge and buy a $3 beer, right? $3 was a big splurge for me, wild and crazy Saturday night. And I had to really think about that because the relative cost of that beer was the absolute cost was $3, but the relative cost to me, because I had so little money and stuff going for me, was relatively high. So that was a big splurge. Now, fast forward several years later, I'm in a very different financial situation. I'm not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but going out for a night on the town and going out to a nice dinner and a show or something like that, it's not that hard for me to do. So I'm like, yeah, sure, that's not a problem. And I don't have nearly as high of a relative perceived cost of doing that, even though the absolute cost is significantly higher. So when it comes to your motivation to train and work out and take the habits that you want, always remember that it's about the relative perceived cost. So there's a lot of stuff out there about people saying, oh, an hour-long workout is only like 4% of your day or something like that. Yeah, sure, but that's the absolute cost to your time to do an hour-long workout. But if you are extremely busy, you still get a good 8 or 9 hours of sleep. You got kids that need to go to school and soccer practice and stuff. You're working 8, 9, 10, 11 hours a day. You've got all these other things you do. Suddenly that 1 hour workout is not 4% of your day. It's maybe 33 or a third of your free time, which means that the relative perceived cost to you can be extremely high. And if that's the case, then you'd better have extremely high benefits in order for you to make it worthwhile. Because always remember that your emotional subconscious does not care if your habits are effective. It doesn't matter if the workout program is working or if you're losing weight on the diet, because your emotion is not based on whether or not it's effective, it's based on whether or not it's worth it. It's worth the perceived cost of what you're investing in your time and your energy and your money and your efforts and so forth. And these things are always somewhat in flux, and it can be very different for you, and more importantly, it can be very different from one period of life to another. Like how, back in the day, spending even a few dollars on a beer had a relatively high perceived cost to me. So most of the time I didn't do it because the motivation to go out and just grab a beer and because I enjoy a good IPA was so high, I didn't do it very much. I wasn't motivated to do it because the perceived relative cost was so high relative to my circumstances. And that can happen to you. If your time is short, your energy is short, your ability to put in effort is relatively low, then even seemingly small habits are going to have a relatively high perceived cost to them. And you're probably not going to be very motivated to do it. However, in other times in your life, when you have a lot more time and energy and you find your motivation is higher, then by all means go a lot harder and faster with your habits. I always use the analogy, it's like driving your car. You can't ever drive your car one speed. Sometimes you got to go slower, sometimes you can go faster. And it's great when you can go faster with an open highway, but sometimes you got to slow down according to your circumstances. And you adjust your speed accordingly in order to just keep moving forward. Because that's the most important thing, is just keep moving forward. So let's put this into a little bit of perspective or practical application now. Let's say you're in a situation where your time is short, your energy is short, and the perceived costs to even the smallest seemingly basic habits is relatively high. What can we do about this? Well, the first thing you can do is see if you can increase your means. I'm always saying live below your means, not just financially, but when it comes to the application of your habits. And a lot of people think that means limit yourself, but it doesn't. A lot of times that means increase your means. Kind of like how I was able to improve my situation by just simply making more money. I got a better job. I grew, my business here, Red Delta Project. I wrote more books and things. I made more money, and therefore a relative perceived cost to a lot of financial expenditures went down just because I had more. So if you're feeling like you're unmotivated, see what you can do to increase your time, your energy, your ability to expend more effort from your body. Make sure your diet's on point. Make sure you're getting plenty of sleep. De-stress. See if you can delegate work. See if you can take stuff off your plate so that you're not having as many of your resources taken up by your actions. See what you can have from help from other people. Basically, free up resources is what I'm saying. Because the more resources you have, the lower the perceived relative cost to basic habits will be, and the better your motivation will be. And then the other thing too is see if you can get more benefit, or at least appreciate better benefits from even small things you do. So a lot of times in our fitness culture, we're taught that small things aren't really worth it, that they don't do anything worthwhile. And that's not at all the case. You could go into, for example, I was working with a client the other day, and I gave her 2 yoga poses. I think it was downward dog and some sort of like a sun salutation kind of exercise. I'm not really big on yoga. I don't really know the terms all that well. But I gave her 2 exercises. And I was like, I want you to spend 30 seconds doing each one every day or every other day. So we're literally talking 60 seconds of exercise here. And so we brought the cost way down. But those 2 exercises were very effective at strengthening and stretching pretty much the entire body from head to toe. And it wasn't a huge thing, but even after doing each one for about 30 seconds, she was like, oh, I feel like I can breathe better. My shoulder doesn't hurt anymore. I'm stretched out a little bit. My posture's better. I feel so much better. I'm like, yeah, exactly. So you did a relatively small little thing for literally 60 seconds, but you've got all of this benefit that you came along with it. And if we put all of our attention onto the benefits of, I've got to lose 50 pounds, I got to build 20 pounds of muscle, I'm trying to get shredded abs and stuff. If the only benefits that we're perceiving are so high and lofty and long term that we can't appreciate the small ones, then again, your motivation is going to be compromised. And therefore, your emotional drive and your actions will be compromised. So it's the same strategy to improve motivation, is decrease your perceived costs, increase your perceived benefits. But always remember, it's about the perceived costs and benefits. It's relative to you. Going out and buying a $300,000 Ferrari would be a very high perceived cost to most people, but there are people out there who have so much money that it's nothing for them. So we want to be in kind of the same way for health and fitness. Make it so that even a short workout or basic exercises is relatively easy for you to do. And when you have more time and energy and effort that you can put in, then by all means do more. But when you don't have those resources, then bring it down and scale it down. But just keep moving forward. That's the most important thing. You don't have to be going 65 miles an hour all the time to reach your destination. You just have to keep moving forward. And when we get stuck into dogmatic thinking and all or nothing kind of principles about stuff, and we're like, well, if I can't do 65 miles an hour and go full on, then what's the point of even trying? I'm just gonna quit or take a break. And even though you could keep moving forward, now you're just pulling off to the side of the proverbial road and you're not doing anything. And that's even worse. So always remember that it's relative costs to relative benefits according to your perceptions and your circumstances. One of the best ways to do that is change your circumstances. Increase your means, increase the energy and the abilities to do things, or get more efficient with your programming. That's one of the reasons why I love calisthenics, my micro workouts and stuff. It doesn't need to be an hour. It doesn't even need to be 20 minutes. I had a guy come into the gym one time with 10 minutes left in his program, and he's like, well, I guess we can't work out today. I was like, what are you talking about? 10 minutes is plenty of time to effectively create a stimulus for what you're trying to do. Come on, let's go. And we didn't even need 10 minutes. He was pretty much done and finished in 7. So it can be done quickly. The perceived cost, because we think it needs to cost so much, and it honestly doesn't. It doesn't need to take nearly as much. It just needs to take something. So adjust your habits accordingly, increase your resources when and where you can, live within your means, proverbially speaking, of course, and make sure that you just keep moving forward. And that's going to keep your motivation high. It's going to keep you taking action, and it's going to greatly increase your chances of success. So thank you very much for watching/listening. Don't forget, share, like, subscribe. If you're on podcast, leave the 5-star reviews. Greatly helps me out here in building up the channel and the podcast. Always remember, this is free for you, but it's not free for me. So any sort of support is greatly appreciated. And best of luck with your training the next week. And I'll talk to you next time. Till then, be fit and live free.